This is the Digital Marketing Experts Podcast episode. No, why am I trying to sound like a radio announcer?
Experts in the Wire, episode 24. Alaura Weaver. Hey everyone out there on The Wire, welcome to episode 24 of Experts on The Wire. Today we have Alaura Weaver. I stumbled across her article on copy hackers called StoryHacking, cracking the code behind the irresistible selling power of stories. No joke, within 5 minutes after reading this article, I knew I wanted her to join us on the show and teach us all about story hacking. So, this is not just the same old advice you hear from all the marketers. Tell your brand story, have a good story, blah, blah, blah. She actually goes into great depth and detail into the various aspects of how to actually do this and do it effectively. It's especially great for somebody like me who is not a good natural storyteller. So she explained it in a way that even I can get, so I think you'll be able to get it as well. So for example, she's going to teach us about how your content needs a hero and also a protagonist, but these are not the people that you might think they should be. And she gives us tangible ways to actually incorporate these characters into your brand's content and a lot more. That's just a little sneak peek. So she even gives me some suggestions for how to market and position this actual podcast, and it's kind of fun. We dissect that a little bit at the end. So if you're working on blog posts, product pages, email newsletters, social media, anything involving language where you're communicating to your customers, which is pretty much everything, I think you will really enjoy this conversation and get a lot of inspirational and actionable tips. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Alaura Weaver. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm really excited to talk about story hacking. As I mentioned to you just before we started recording, storytelling is not something that comes super naturally to me, and I'm sure a lot of the people in the audience are going to love to hear about some of the tips that you have to share. But before we get into that, I just want to give the listeners a quick idea about yourself. So you're a freelance writer?
I'm a freelance copywriter.
Okay.
I do some content writing. I do blog writing. But I've been mostly focusing my business on creating sales copy, more specifically inbound sales copy for startups. And it's been a wonderful experience. It's amazing.
Great. And so did you kind of get into things approaching it from the marketing side or more from the story and copywriting side?
Interesting question. I started things from the, oh my gosh, I need to do something other than being a stay-at-home mom side. And I had 10 years of sales in my back pocket.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So sales for a company or?
B2B sales. I did advertising sales. I did inside sales, outside sales, pretty much any kind of sales other than retail sales.
Oh, wow. I might throw in a few ad hoc questions off of that because I can imagine the sales experience must have really informed what you're doing now with copywriting and marketing.
Absolutely. Part of my, what I loved about sales was connecting with people. What I hated about sales was manipulating people.
Right.
So as I started to discover the world of digital marketing, I saw that there were it was starting to split into two camps. You have the kind of old world outbound sales, pushy, salesy type of work that you see on like pop-up ads, or we see them on the clickbait, the when you're manipulating people through fear or shock or guilt. And that's, for me, that's kind of contributing to a whole bunch of unhappiness in the world.
Yeah, it's
right?
kind of a turnoff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just a turnoff, but it's, if you're constantly being bombarded with these messages that you are not complete as a human being unless you have this product, then you're going to start feeling pretty bad about yourself.
Right. So like from a
and
moral
I hated
level,
doing that in my sales work too, because we would be taught these, especially in advertising sales, you'd be taught certain framework of how to sell the product. And this was, I sold Yellow Pages advertising.
Really?
Okay. So this is way back. Remember the phone book? But now the internet is the phone book. So my discomfort with sales was in that kind of manipulative, exploitative approach of how do we push people's buttons to get them to buy. And my approach, and the approach that I love about inbound marketing, is saying, how do we create emotional connections with people, not just so that they'll buy now, but that they'll convert into long-term relationships.
Yes, definitely. So it's great to set up this context for the listeners, because I think it will give them the standpoint to kind of like how they're going to view the rest of what we're going to talk about. Because it's just to contrast what you're going to talk about with that slimy kind of, pushy world of sales and outbound. I think it's a great kind of contrast. So it leads nicely into actually a question I had for you, because you said that you proudly say that you speak human. And I put that in quotes because that's right in your Twitter profile. And can you expand upon what you mean by that? And maybe that does relate to what you were just talking about.
Absolutely. Speaking human to me is acknowledging that people have lives and that they're individuals and that life is messy and emotional. And everybody is seeking to tell a story. They want their story to be told. When you leave this world, you want a story to be left behind about you. Okay, so that's pretty much being human, right?
Yes.
That's how human beings connect, is through storytelling.
Yes.
Versus sales speak, or what I call new speak, because I'm a science fiction nerd, and that's a reference to 1984. That ignores the messiness of life, and it treats the target user as a metric. Okay, so it's just a number, just a click on the sales sheet, and it focuses on the just the commerce aspect of the relationship versus how you're going to partner with the person to tell a story.
Yes, absolutely. I really like that approach. I mean, it's something that just to kind of inject a thought that I've had about this podcast real quickly is I'm still relatively new to podcasting, right? I've done it for 22 episodes now.
You've been making a lot of content, my friend.
Yeah. No, it's been fun. I mean, and there's a real intrinsic value, but after 20 episodes, I start to realize a lot of the value for the listeners is introducing people like you and people like Rick Mulready, who I just had on the show, or somebody like Anuj from Growth Hackers, like all these people that they might not otherwise have met, and framing that kind of connection for them in the real world. So now maybe they might go up to them at a conference and say, hey, nice to meet you. I heard you on the Experts on the Wire podcast. And that's a really cool feeling to me of bringing people together that might have a similar value or a similar connection. And it's totally beyond marketing. It's not a marketing thing.
It's about creating communities. It's about creating tribes.
Yes.
There's kind of like this sense of, well, but really, is it really about sales? Well, yeah, it's capitalism, but there's no reason why capitalism can't have a conscience, Yes. That there's no reason why capitalism has to be an empty commerce because this is just as intrinsic to people's lives. The purchasing and the consumption of goods is just as intrinsic to people's lives as the relationships they have with each other. So why can't we make that as profound and important as those relationships?
Absolutely. So I would love to get into the story hacking. So first of all, I want to separate story and hacking. So this word hacking is very popular now in the marketing world, in the startup world. What does the word hacking mean to you?
Well, to be perfectly honest, the word hacking to me is a buzzword. I was very reluctant to use the word hacking, but since the title was for copy hackers, it was appropriate to their brand. Joanna Weeb, who's amazing, she's the one who suggested that as part of the title. And I was like, all right. Since it's copy hackers, I'll do it. But I understand, especially in the startup and tech world, that there's a certain place in everybody's heart with hacking, because those are about finding ways to optimize and make efficient growth and just kind of take not necessarily shortcuts, but the quickest route from point A to point B without cutting corners, with making sure that you kind of have an eye on the big picture of the holistic picture.
Yes, totally. Yeah, I like that. I mean, yeah, it is kind of a buzzword, but I think instantly when people hear the word hacking, there's a connection and they kind of get what you mean.
Yeah.
And
well, at this point, it's become part of the vernacular.
Yes, totally.
There are some times where I push back against terms.
Yeah.
Because I'm also a word nerd. You know, I love language. And so when I hear like the term growth hacking to me is I get what it means, and I think that it was brilliant, but at the same time, just the aesthetics of the word growth hacking is kind of gross.
Right, I hear you. Like the what's the word? The phonetics of it, like just how it sounds, and
it's comparable to the word moist. You know, like people have this like intrinsic oogie feeling when they hear the word moist.
That brings me to
the same thing for me.
I had Amy Harrison on the show a few episodes ago, and we were talking about product names. And there was this one app called Jelly. Have you heard of it?
No.
Yeah, I mean that's your reaction is for the listeners that can't see. You made like a face
I made a new face.
Yeah, exactly. It's why would I be excited to tell somebody you've got to use this app Jelly? It's this unattractive word.
Yeah.
I don't even know what the app does. I can't remember what it does.
Well, because you've got it's with language, this is actually appropriate to the topic, is that you have a visceral response. It's, you have, when you hear a word, you're taking yourself and you're putting yourself immediately into that situation where you've experienced that term before. Jelly is typically a cold, gooey substance that people don't like to touch with their hands unless they're like 3-year-olds who love to play with goop and slime and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, jelly it's gelatinous, it's cold, it's not something that you really want to interact with, and it certainly doesn't bring to mind comfort if that's what the emotional response that they're trying to create is.
I love that analysis. That's even farther than I took it in my head. So I like that. So now
that's what I do.
Yeah, totally. I can tell. So I want to get into story hacking specifically now.
Sure.
Who is story hacking for? I mean, my assumption is this can apply to really it's language. So like to me, there's like nobody this doesn't apply to, but am I right with that? Like, can this basically apply to anybody?
Yes. The specific audience for the article that I wrote were startup founders and marketing professionals. And I think it really appeals to people in the tech world that have they've been kind of not brainwashed, but just they're attuned to left brain, logical, rational thinking because they're into code. They're into thinking things out as a puzzle. But unfortunately, or fortunately for me, human beings are emotional animals. So, and because we are emotional animals, we have to have certain patterns that we respond to help us make decisions and remember things. And that pattern is called a story. So just like when you are dealing with inbound marketing strategy, there are certain frameworks that you want to stick to as far as the landing page being the gateway to the content, and then the content being emailed out, and then the email, then that turning into some kind of position in the sales funnel. That's a pattern that people follow. But that's actually a story that you're creating.
Right.
That's what story hacking is about, is taking that pattern and putting an emotional value and a meaning to it.
Got it. So in a marketing context, the article was for, like you said, startup people, marketers that can incorporate story hacking into what they're doing with marketing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to take a stretch here, and this is where my brain goes. I'm thinking of all the places I could apply this in a marketing scenario, just like the different places. So I would imagine like blog posts and articles, but I mean, what about Facebook ads or email marketing?
Absolutely. Because what's cool about storytelling is that there are stories within stories. Like the best stories in the world if you think about the most timeless classic stories like 1001 Arabian Nights, that is a story within a story. It's Scheherazade is telling stories and little pieces of it. And that's what you can think about your marketing as. You've got a big story that you're trying to tell, which is about the brand itself. But within that, you're telling little mini stories to get people to inform and engage within that larger story.
Yeah.
So a Facebook ad is a little tiny, or even a Twitter post is that's a 140 character story. Although now that's changing, but still, so, that's a 140 character story that you can tell.
This might be a semantic thing for me, but I always have my trouble wrapping my head around. Can you how do I tell a story in a tweet? Are you talking about actually beginning to end telling a story in one tweet, or are you telling it across a series of tweets, or what's the framework of that?
It can go both ways. You can tell a tiny. I mean, the best comedians in the world can tell the best joke, which is a story within the framework of one tweet, right?
Right.
You have to identify within that tweet who you're talking to, what they want, what you have to overcome, and basically what the outcome of that struggle is in any kind of story. That's the story. Okay. So a joke has that element to it. A guy walks into a bar. What does he want? But you can do that with, a Facebook post, visual story. You don't even have to have words in a story to show the context of who you're talking to or who you're talking about and what the situation is.
Yeah, totally.
Does that answer the question?
It does. Yeah. I mean, I think just semantically, when I hear story, I think like book or movie or something big. Yeah. But it can be like a little micro story, and I like that. It could be like
a nugget of a story. I mean, it's profound, and we could talk for hours and hours and hours just on what a story is. But when it comes to story hacking, it's about identifying the patterns of a story and applying whatever it is that you want to communicate to that pattern.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's get into your article on copy hackers, and we're going to link to everything in the show notes so the listeners can just sit back and relax and then go to evolvingseo.com/wire whenever you want after and get all the links. You talk about the 11 elements of story hacking, and I don't think we're going to get through all 11 in one podcast, but I'd love to start talking through at least the first, 1 to maybe 4, or so we'll see how many we can fit in, just to get, because your article is very practical it tells people what they can do to put stories in, and it's actionable. So let's give the listeners some of that right now. So what is the first element of story hacking?
Okay, so the first element of story hacking is always going to be identifying who your hero is. Okay. And in marketing, your hero is going to be, it's not your business, it's your target customer.
Huh, interesting. See, I've never really heard it put this way before. So immediately where my head goes, so now what am I doing? Is that framing how I speak to them? How the copy is written? Like, tangibly, how does that play out?
Well, that plays out in marketing with the buyer persona, or I have something that I call the hero character sheet or the customer profile. But it's ultimately about identifying who is going to be the person who's going to interact with your brand and what they want to accomplish with your brand.
Got it. Yeah, I'm scanning through your article as we're talking through it.
And it's a lot, I know.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot here. So I want to encourage people just to go check out the article to get all the details. So what's the second element of story hacking? Okay,
so the second story hacking element is identifying what the world that protagonist lives in.
So by world, do you mean like a physical place or a point in time or all of the above, or what does that mean?
It can be all of the above. When I'm thinking of digital marketing, though, I'm thinking about like the emotional spectrum that they live in. So, for example, my favorite example is my husband. He is a guy who is the biggest gear junkie in the world. Okay.
Yeah.
and he loves outdoors. Okay. So the world that he lives in is this world of adventure. He loves to see what it's like to, I say adventure is seeking a connection to the experience of being alive, right? And he's motivated by this notion of, I want to go out and I want to feel excited and invigorated by life. And I love tech and I love design. So I want to see what the best things that I can use to have that experience is. And I know that sounds very broad and just like almost a little too psychological. But storytelling is about getting a little epic, right?
Right.
So I have this little tool that I use that Ralph Jensen, who wrote a book called The Dream Society. It's an amazing book, and it's not long, but I think I recommend it to everybody who wants to do digital marketing. He identified these 6 emotional worlds that people live in, and it's basically what they're motivated by, what turns them on. And there's the world of adventure. There's the world of togetherness, which is seeking a connection to others and sense of belonging. And in the article, I use these examples of websites that live in those worlds. Okay, so if we're talking about the world of adventure, you've got GoPro, right? I mean, they could have easily turned it into kind of you can use this camera to seek out scientific discoveries or at live events like concerts or something like that. But no, they decided to adopt the world of adventure, of risk taking, and capturing that excitement of risk taking. And it definitely appeals to risk takers. The world of togetherness is seeking a connection to others. And Medium is a great platform for that. And if you look at their website, they use words like a community. They use words like interact and with what matters most to you. It's a community, and you look at the graphics, and it's even of a village, a sci-fi village, but still a futuristic community, all coming together and converging to share ideas. Then you take a look at the other worlds, which is the world of caregiving and receiving care. And a great example of that, which I use on my article, is Volunteer Match, which I've used before when I lived in DC. It was a great resource to just get out of the house and start helping people out.
Yeah.
And if you look at their website, they're going to show people helping people, and they use the word care like 5 different times on their landing page. So it's talking to somebody who cares about people. I know that it sounds a little abstract to say, well, these are the worlds that people live in. But if you think about the world that you live in and what you want to surround yourself in, you probably live in a very different home than, say, or I live in a very different home than, say, somebody who's really into antiques and the past and history, right?
Great example, yeah.
So, that person probably surrounds themselves with objects from the past, whereas I surround myself with eclectic things that are very artsy and from around the world, because that's the world that I live in. I live in the world of togetherness, basically.
So here's one of my questions about these different worlds, which I love, by the way. I'm looking through them on the post. Is there a danger on the flip side of excluding people if you make your world about too much of one thing?
Well, that's a really great question as far as inbound marketing is concerned in general. You always, with great inbound marketing, you're going to start with one buyer persona, right? You're not going to be like, well, I want to target this group of people, because then you get vague and you want to start pleasing everybody.
Right.
When you get more specific in the story that you're trying to tell, that's how people get empathic, right? That's how people get start relating to that experience, because you're not going to alienate somebody who's not going to want that product to begin with.
Right.
The more specific you get, the more interesting it gets.
Yeah.
and the more likely you're going to attract your target user.
So and I love that answer, by the way, because I agree. I mean, I've seen GoPro branch out to, if you go to their YouTube channel, now they have videos of musicians playing the drums with a GoPro on, which gets away from adventure, certainly from that world. Maybe more the artistic, creative world, self-expression, like is the Motivation 5 I just landed on here. And I think it's interesting. What was the question I just had? This is what happens sometimes when
are you worried about alienating people by being too focused in that specific world?
Yeah, well, I think there's that. My question leads to, how do we incorporate this now into, is it just like what you just said? So you define the world of your buyer, and then you put that on your website, you put that in your emails, you put that in it's kind of like having a brand voice, and then that gets pushed into the different materials you have. Is that basically, it's as straightforward as that?
Absolutely. It's informing on the type of trigger words you're going to use. It's going to inform on the design, the graphics you're going to use, the font, everything. But as far as you're talking about GoPro branching out to musicians now, it's a different world, although it might not be, because going on stage is very risky. A lot of people are terrified of doing public performance. Getting in public. So, and they could probably be, I haven't seen those videos yet, but that would be an aspect, that fear of being on stage and the excitement of being cheered on by thousands of people. Yeah, totally. That's very raw, right? But that's a different story that they're telling. And that's a great story too. Yeah, I love that. But chances are they're not going to be telling that story on their extreme sports story. Right. Yeah, I see the difference. So let's get to element 3. I love how you frame this. You say a call to adventure, not a call to, what you put in parentheses, goal or problem to solve. But I also don't want that to be confused with a call to action, because that's actually later on in the story. Okay. So call to adventure is when you're identifying what that goal is of that protagonist. So we've already talked about the fact that we've got a protagonist, we've got a hero. They're living in this world that they want to surround themselves in, but they've got a problem that's standing in their way, right? Everybody has a goal in life to create their own world around themselves. But either that world is full of family, or it's full of fame. It's full of money, but there's something standing in the way. And that's when the adventure begins, is when you confront that problem. Yes. And say, okay, we need to overcome this problem. So the call to adventure is, I'm just kind of scanning here. It says basically they want an objective to strive for. So is that kind of like, so Moz, for example, is a company we all know. I'm a Moz associate. So I'm familiar with them. They kind of have this mission that Rand talks about occasionally, to help marketers do better marketing, to make it easier. Like, why is SEO so hard to do? There should be tools to make it easier, right? So is that kind of what you're talking about? It almost reminds me of like Simon Sinek's Why. Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And we'll talk about that a little later too, because we'll talk about that when we get into like brand voice and the role of your company. But the call to adventure is about answering. It's about saying, you know what, there is a problem here, and we need to fix it. Another example I just noticed was Warby Parker. I just stumbled across one of the co-founders on Twitter, and he's talking all about the problem in the world, and we both wear glasses, of so many people not having good eyesight. Yeah. And like, that reminds me of a call to adventure. It's this big problem. It's a perfect, because especially if you're living in the world of caregiving or wanting to help other people, and you're seeing, oh my gosh, he's right. There's so many people who have poor eyesight, and that can get in the way of so many things that they want to do. I want to do something about that. Right. How do I help? Right. And Warby Parker, and there's the next step of the story, says, hey, we can help you help them. So how do they communicate? I mean, it's just as simple as that. He's tweeting about this call to adventure. Is it as simple as that? Just talking about it? He's bringing awareness to a problem. Yeah. Awesome. Exactly. Yeah, we're getting through more elements than I thought, which is great, because I love all these. So
Let's get to element 4. You call it the stakes/refusal of the call, nightmare scenario. Can you explain that a little?
Okay, so this is actually something that I discovered through Neil Patel. He has an advanced marketing consultant program that I participated in that takes you kind of through the frameworks of inbound marketing and how to really scale your business. And one of the first things he says is you need to identify the worst case scenario for your customer so you can save them from it or help them get out of it.
Oh, interesting.
And that also helps you really put yourself in the shoes of your customer so you can start emotionally connecting with them and saying, hey, you're not alone. We're here to help.
So do you have an example in the post here?
Well, the example in the post that I used was my own sales letter.
That's great.
Where I was talking to marketing professionals who, gosh, everybody's dealt with the content deadline where they're overwhelmed and they say, oh my gosh, I've got, I've got a monster blog post that I need to get written now for this customer, but life keeps getting in the way. Or I've got my own business to run and I've got other clients to deal with. And this huge amount of content is sitting in front of me and I have no idea where to even begin. That's the nightmare scenario, because then what happens, right? Then you think about the domino effect of, so what happens if you don't write that blog post? Well, if it's for a client, they can say, this person isn't reliable. They're not coming through. Then you've lost opportunity for a recommendation from that client. Then they might find somebody else who will go on time, or I think worse is they'll go like to a shisty little content mill website and get their, get cheap content shopped out that's really poor, and then that will be a detriment to their company because then they stop having engaging content. So you go through all of the dominoes that fall down as a result of this blank screen that's sitting in front of you. So that's the nightmare scenario.
Just to play devil's advocate just for a tiny second, and
go right ahead,
because I can think of some of the listeners maybe recalling what we talked about in the beginning with sales playing into fear. And so how does this differ? And I'm kind of setting up maybe for you to answer.
No,
that.
I love that you brought that up. Okay, so the difference is when you bring people to a state of fear and shock and let them know you better do this or this is going to happen, it's a threat, right? And you're just like on news broadcasts, news at 11. Do you know where your children are? Are your children, I use an example in this where Thermos had this ad was like, if you don't use a thermos, your baby could die because flies with lots of germs could get in their milk.
Oh my goodness.
What? Well, yeah, that got my attention. But thanks, Thermos, for giving me nightmares.
Right, yeah.
So, it's terrifying. Whereas with a compassionate, you're able to identify, look, this is a terrible scenario. We've been there before with you, right?
Yeah.
You're not scared, and that's showing compassion.
So you're more taking...
You're not alone. And then the next step of the story is saying, okay, so let's help you solve this problem and make sure that this nightmare scenario never happens.
Got it. So you're being more empathetic.
Absolutely.
Rather than using it, like you said, as a threat. So I'm glad I asked. I like that distinction. So let's move on to element 5. I'm already thinking of ways to incorporate this into my marketing, my clients' marketing, and helping to talk about the podcast too. Awesome. But element 5 is a helper. So you kind of hinted at this, and I see you mentioned Simon Sinek there.
Yeah.
You're talking about positioning the brand as the entity that can help with the problem that's been identified.
Yeah, because historically, especially with advertising, the brand is always positioned as the hero of the story. And then it's like, how often do you like to sit in a conversation where somebody's talking all about themselves?
Right.
there's no relationship there. It's just blah, 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 and you start tuning them out after a while. But when the brand is actually asking questions of you and saying, how can I help? And saying, look, this is a situation that I've noticed happening to a lot of people. Is this happening to you? And then that person says, well, yes, it does. Okay, great. Let's work together to solve this problem. And this can, I'm sounding very deep, but I mean, I did this with a backpack. Okay. Mm-hmm. I had a client who was a Kickstarter campaign for a travel backpack. And the target customer was a frequent traveler, a business commuter, somebody who probably has 500 different types of luggage and has to switch from their laptop bag to their carry-on bag, and it just, they're juggling a lot.
It's a hassle.
And it's the nightmare scenario is while they're juggling all of their stuff, they can't get across town to the client meeting, for example. They just got off of the airplane and they can't, they're losing time. So how can you get off the airplane and walk straight to the clients? Well, you have a backpack that converts from a backpack into a briefcase. And this is how we can help. And that's the brand right there. It's also saying we're passionate about travel too. We know why you love your job because we love traveling as well. So you're saying that we have a lot in common here, but the difference is we've got the ability to design this backpack and create it for you. And that's where the difference between the brand and the hero is.
Got it. Yeah, I like that distinction because I used to think of a hero as somebody that helps, but the hero is helping in more of like a controlling kind of way. More of like would you agree with that? Like a dominating kind of way, whereas the helper is more like side by side, like trying to support the person?
The hero is in a quest. Okay? So every great piece of literature features a hero that's in a quest for something.
For their own thing that they want.
Right. Like, let's take Star Wars. What's the quest of Luke Skywalker? Well, his quest ultimately is to find his family, and he finds it in the end. But he also finds a one in Leia and Han and Chewbacca, right?
Yep.
It's also his quest is to defeat the power of the dark side. If it was a story about Obi-Wan Kenobi, which kind of was in the prequel, but the prequels don't count. That would be a very different story, and it probably wouldn't be as compelling, and the audience wouldn't root on Luke.
Yep.
So the hero isn't dominating. It's just that they're on a quest. And if your brand was the hero, then the quest would be to sell something, which, I'm not going to root you on to sell something to me, but I certainly am going to root you on to help me on my own journey.
I get it. Yeah, I like the distinction there. So we're getting through a lot of these, which is great, because I think the listeners will enjoy being able to hear about these as well as read them after. Element 6, you talk about a magical item, your offer. So tell us about that.
Okay, so the magical item is what it is that you're selling or want people to opt into. And it's got, one of the big points that I make is it's got to be magical. It can't be just like, well, here's the thing. It's got to be something that's hard to come by. That you've got to build scarcity around it. So to continue with that Star Wars analogy, which is perfect, the magical item that Obi-Wan was the helper. Okay, let's say that Luke is the brand, is the hero. Obi-Wan's the brand. What's he going to sell to Luke that's going to help him in his quest? Well, he's going to sell him his expertise as a Jedi Master, and he's got this awesome thing called a lightsaber, right? Mm-hmm. So, and in the article I mentioned, is the lightsaber... I'm sorry. Is the lightsaber something that is the hero of the story? Because David Ogilvy, who's an advertising scion that people look to and read about says the product is the hero in the story. And I say, no, that it's not true. The product is not the hero. It is the magical item that helps the hero towards his quest.
Interesting. So you're kind of distinguishing between like an object and a person.
Yeah. It's a tool.
Got it. So the tool, so if we can, I know some of the listeners might be involved with software or computer products. So the tool in that case is their piece of software. The hero is the person at the company that can help the person with their problem.
Let's back up. The magical item is the software.
Yes.
Okay. The helper is the brand that's offering that software.
Got it.
And the hero is the user, is the person who's going to buy the software.
See, I'm glad we're reviewing this.
Yeah.
It takes a few times with me sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Got it.
An example one of my clients right now, they're beta testing I can't wait until it comes out live. It's a piece of software called Time Hero that they take your schedule and you get the big picture of your schedule. But let's say that you need to reschedule something because your kid gets sick. They have already taken all of the tasks that you need to accomplish towards your goal, and it will automatically find the best time to reschedule your tasks.
Really?
Yup. It's amazing. I cannot wait until this goes live because it's going to save my life. Literally.
When's that going to come out?
Save my life. So that is a magical object, right? Yeah. For the landing page that I'm creating, the magical object, the scarcity that I'm creating is that because it's for beta testers, is you get early access to this.
Right. Classic.
And that's the magical part of it. It's not available to everybody right now.
Right. Right.
Because you're the hero of this story, and because you really need it to accomplish your life goal. And the hero in this particular landing page, the target user is freelancers, and especially parent freelancers, because my goodness, trying to work and juggle childcare, it is a balancing act. My husband says it's like trying to cross 4 lanes of highway. And it literally will. I love the fact that it's called Time Hero, because it literally will save your life, because your life is made up of time. Right. So the helper in this situation is called Time Hero, not to confuse things, but the hero really is the freelancer whose quest is to grow their business and provide quality time to their family. Their software, the scheduling tool, is going to help them accomplish that.
That's great. And when is that tool coming out for anyone interested?
I do not know what their timeline is as far as the launch is concerned. They're just doing a soft launch right now.
Okay. We'll link to it. And if anybody's interested, you can go check that out as well. I think I'm going to check that out. Sounds cool.
Yeah. Right now they're using they haven't put up my landing page, my work, but you can still check it out and sign up.
I like it. So let's talk about maybe one or two more elements here. So 7, when I read the heading, it's sort of, I don't want to call it vague, but I don't instantly get a picture of what this is. So crossing the first threshold, CTA. Can you paint a picture? What is that exactly?
Well, CTA means call to action.
Okay, so it's CFT is crossing the first threshold.
Yeah. You know what? Thank you for pointing that out.
Yep.
I don't think any of us, I worked with the Copy Hackers editing team, and that nobody pointed that out, that people were thinking crossing the first threshold was CTA was the acronym. So crossing the first threshold.
Is it supposed to be like that, or it's supposed to be? No,
it's supposed to be like, crossing the threshold is the metaphor for your call to action.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So the call to action is your click button, right, on a landing page, or your call to action is, scheduling an appointment. Whatever that first moment of actual interaction, live interaction with the brand, is that crossing of the first threshold, right? So if I'm looking at a website and they're speaking to me and saying, they're identifying what my problems are, and they're saying, we can help, and here's the tool. If they've done their job right, I will have no choice but to click that get more information button or enroll now or free trial, because they've done their work and they've captured me emotionally and logically.
Got it. So I want to stop there at 7. I like the number 7, and it's a good place to stop, I think. Sure. And I want to encourage the listeners to go to this post, which we'll link to on Copy Hackers. I'm sure if you Google Copy Hackers Story Hacking, it will come right up. Mm-hmm. But I want to encourage everyone to go check out all of it. I want to kind of, now my brain is thinking like a story, and I'm thinking about this interview as a story. We kind of started with you were in sales, you didn't like it. It was unpleasant, like just the pushing and the manipulating. We talked about a lot of story hacking things. And I want to kind of wrap it up with I want to touch back on the mindset of it again, because we kind of talked about that at the beginning. When people are incorporating this into their marketing, what should their mindset be? I mean, this is not something that's just going to work instantly and they're just going to all of a sudden get customers, right? Like, what should people have in their mindset?
This is a slow cooker method. It's just like when you're at a barbecue. You know, the best meat, the best, most juicy, most satisfying experience is going to happen after you let it simmer and really put a lot of love into it. With telling a great story, you've got to build trust, and trust doesn't happen like that. You've got to convince people that you're for real, that you understand where they're coming from, and this is inbound marketing again. Outbound marketing is all about getting that quick sale and increasing your numbers. But inbound marketing is about increasing the quality of the numbers, the quality of the leads. A great example is early in my copywriting career, I was very confident and a little overconfident, which means when you're overconfident, your confidence gets undermined very easily. So I had an author who approached me and said, I want you to do redo a product description for me on Amazon, because right now my book sales are not what I want them to be. I looked at it and I realized that she was targeting her based on what her book was about. She was like in the romance section when she needed to be in like the sci-fi section. Okay. Now, when I redid her copy and made sure that she was targeted to the right reader, her sales kind of flatlined for a little bit and then started picking up again. But she got alarmed because she saw, oh my gosh, my numbers, they're not like, people aren't picking this up. But I'm like, wait a second. And at the moment, I was like, oh no, I'm not doing my job right, because I'm supposed to be making her so many more sales. Now that I look back at it, I realized if we had taken the time to look at who was buying her book and seeing how enthusiastic they were, and seeing one of the questions that people have is like, what are brand advocates? This is about building brand advocates. This is about ultimately minimizing the marketing you have to do in the long run, because people are selling this for you. So if she had taken a look at who was buying her book and how much they were talking about it and writing reviews, then the numbers would have justified that long-term goal of creating more buzz and more excitement and more engagement.
Right. So this is not one of those like fast win things. You set up an ad and you get all these leads. This is, like you said, it's a slow boil. So
it's a slow boil, but if you do it right, like I have another client who they had a very specific target, and they did a great job of targeting their Facebook ad, and they got more than they expected in terms of applications for their their course. And it was from the type of people that they wanted to come. You know, they didn't have to weed through as much of the irrelevant leads, because they actually were overwhelmed by the amount of positive response that they got, and they had a tougher decision to make when it came to people getting accepted their course.
Got it.
So
yeah,
it's a good problem to have. But yeah, it isn't a quick sale type of thing. And if you want to grab people's attention quick, that's fine. And there are great methods to do that. But I advocate for but make sure that you're telling a really strong story to those people over the long run, because you're cultivating more relationships.
Absolutely. So the last little section here, I want to wrap up, and I'm going to see how well I learned some of this stuff, and you can help me here.
Okay.
I want to go back through a few of these elements and relate it to this podcast, because this is something I'm trying to work on a little bit, and I think this would be fun for the listeners to hear this kind of play out a little. Element 1, which is the protagonist, a relatable protagonist hero. So my hero is the listener.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, good. I'm 1 for 1.
But wait a second. Who is your listener?
That's a great question. I honestly am not totally sure, and I think that's where part of my problem comes from, because what I thought I was doing at the beginning was creating a podcast about a topic. But now, as I said to you before we started, what I think I'm doing is creating a podcast that connects people that overlap with some topics, but also overlap in their values. And I want people to learn, but I also would like them to be introduced to people like you or like the other guests that I've had, and carry that into real life. So I don't know who that person is. Maybe somebody that doesn't get to conferences a lot, so they're looking for other ways to virtually meet people. I'm not quite sure how to define that person. Maybe you have some thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, you're kind of already identifying a problem, right? So that person is maybe like me. I bring parenthood a lot into this because that's the world I'm living in right now.
Yeah.
But as a parent and a professional, it's hard for me to travel. It's hard for me to develop professionally because I don't have the time to get away from my family as much as I'd like to. That sounds terrible, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely think that I'm a target listener for you because I'm a professional who works in the marketing world. I'm also tech savvy enough to think that podcasts are a great tool. And I'm tech savvy enough to appreciate and understand the language that your guests speak, which is oftentimes, digital speak.
Yeah, totally. And I think your worlds thing is interesting because some people might be freelancers like yourself. Some might work for a company, but remotely. And so that's where I was struggling at the beginning, was trying to put people in a box of their work situation or why they're doing marketing, but maybe categorizing or framing it more by the life situation,
right,
which is what you're talking about, seems to work better. Like, for example, another thing is people that have to commute obviously listen to podcasts. People that travel listen to, so that's like categorically somebody that might consume this type of content as well.
But if you're talking about in terms of world building, you could have a very different world just by the intent of your podcast, right? So connecting people and introducing people that have similar passions and interests and want to develop themselves, that's a great world goal, right?
Yes.
I want to connect to people who want to help me foster relationships between my clients and the brands that I represent. Or I'm sorry, between my clients, which are brands, and the people that they want to sell to. Okay. But I could have a very different role. I could be a marketing go-getter who, I've got that A-type personality and I want, what's the quickest, best way to do this, right? That's a very different world. That's that. Love him, but Tim Ferriss is all about 10x in your life, right? And it's like that. He's got a very powerful brand. He lives in that adventure world,
right?
But it sounds like you're living more in that world of togetherness.
Yeah, I think the motivation too with the medium example definitely resonated. I didn't thoroughly look at the other ones, but that definitely kind of came to me as part of the mission of the podcast more recently. So versus just pushing out information and then they consume, which is great, it's connecting people as well. And
so when you're talking about that world, that can inform on the aesthetics of your podcast too.
Yes.
So the introduction to your podcast right now is that what am I doing talking like I'm on the radio? Which is funny.
You
and it's
actually
kind of
listened.
like, oh, what is this? Because it does sound like that Tim Ferriss experience. Not to diss Tim, because he's awesome.
Yeah.
But that's a very different world than the one we're talking about.
Yes.
So you're kind of putting the record scratch on that and saying, no, this is different. This isn't about that.
Yeah, it's funny because that just kind of happened by accident. I was testing my mic and I was trying to record the first intro of my first show, and it just happened. And I was like, oh, that's funny. I'll just stick it at the beginning. And this was before I even launched, so there was no thought into the world that I was trying to create. At the same time, though, I like the sense of showing sort of my kind of vulnerable side a little bit, because it's not embarrassing, but it's slightly like personal and like making fun of myself. And that's I want people to feel welcome and like they can be themselves when they come to the show.
Yeah, because it's also saying I'm still learning about this whole thing too. So let's learn together, right? And that's positioning. If we're talking about the steps in the story hacking, that's positioning yourself as a helper. It's saying, let's learn together. I've got these, and what differentiates yourself between yourself and the listener is the fact that you have these connections. You have the ability to reach out to these experts and bring them to your podcast and have a really great conversation with them.
Yeah, totally. I'm very impressed you listened to the intro and picked up on that. Not many people have mentioned the intro to me. So it's good to get feedback on it, actually. Yeah. And let's talk about one more thing I want to make sure I got correctly and can apply to the podcast. And I appreciate your live advice on this, by the way.
Absolutely.
So element 3, this is where I'm running into some trouble, I think, a call to adventure. And maybe I just need to do the show more, but I'm not sure how to define this, I guess, for the show. What am I calling the listeners to do? And maybe we could talk through that.
I think that if I were to reframe the call to adventure, it would be more like identifying the problem, right?
Right.
So if you're saying, look, many of you are out there in your own world, your career world right now, and you're already saying, if you're on a plane, if you're in your car, that means you're in the world. You're doing your work. Here's some people that will help you do your work better. That if you went to a conference, you would meet them, but you probably don't have time. So I'm going to bring these people to you in your car or next to you on the airplane to have an hour-long conversation with.
Sure. And I think as you're
the call to adventure in that situation is, how can we connect more with experts in our profession?
Yes.
And you're offering that solution.
And I think as you're talking through that, this is actually helping, which is great. So I appreciate that. I'm also thinking of, there's other places people can go, but they might feel like they can't be themselves, or like there's an intimidation factor, or like, I'm new here, so can I speak up?
Or they can't even get to talk to that person because they're, just a panelist on a conference, and you don't actually get to have a one-on-one conversation with them.
Right. So yeah, I like that. This has been helpful, and I was thinking through some of these things over the weekend. So it's very interesting how this kind of happens, how I'm interviewing you now, and I was kind of thinking about this stuff. So this was excellent. I'm really glad that I got you on the show and talked about story hacking and just all this great marketing stuff. So the last thing I want you to tell the listeners, so they can connect with you, is where can they find you online? And are you going to be out there anywhere in the real world where people can connect with you as well?
Right now, I'm preparing to move my family from Ohio to Minnesota, so I will probably not be going to any conferences for a while. Yeah, wow. But if you want to get in touch with me, you can go to my website, which is wordweaverfreelance.com. And I have a little button that basically says talk human to human with me. And you can schedule a 15 to 30 minute free consultation via Calendly. Like I said, I'm taking the month of, I don't know when this is going to air, but I'm taking a month off to situate my family. Yep. And then I'm going full force into my career again. Awesome. And you can also visit me on, I fell in love with Twitter. I that's another story, but I was one of those, snooty. I'm never going to tweet a single thing.
Yep.
And then I just fell in love with it. So my handle on Twitter is @wordweaverfree. And I love interacting with people on Twitter that way too.
Awesome. So definitely say hi to Alaura on Twitter when you hear this episode. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Alaura Weaver. And by the way, if anybody's interested, I've created a Twitter list with every guest that's been on Experts on the Wire. So if you just go to evolvingseo.com/Twitter list, it will redirect you to that list. And you can follow all of the guests that have been on Experts on the Wire in that one list. You can also find it, of course, through my Twitter account, but that's just a short way to get to it. So I hope that is useful for you to connect with all the guests. And that's it. That's all I got today. So I'll see you next time for episode 25 of Experts on the Wire.